This scriptural reading today has many good lessons in it. One of the most important is a literal translation of Jesus' words, that it's not what goes into a man's mouth that makes him unclean, but what comes out of his mouth. When we speak angry words or hateful words, when we gossip, when we are unkind, when we're complaining, speaking all those negative energies, when they come out of our mouth, they're not only hurting people around us and, as I like to say, polluting the environment, but most of all, they're hurting us. They're making us, as Jesus said, unclean. It's a very, very important spiritual practice to monitor what comes out of the mouth. And the more you do that, the more you see, oh, did I really want to say it that way? That was kind of nasty. Do I really want to put that kind of energy out into the world? And you practice that faithfully, monitoring what comes out of your mouth. And what happens? You start thinking, I'm thinking some unclean thoughts too. Why am I thinking that about that person or that situation? Why am I fearful? Why am I angry? Why am I complaining? Why am I worrying? One of the most wonderful spiritual tools that Master gave us is, he said, go on a worry fast. Refuse all thoughts of worry. Don't go there. Eliminate that from your consciousness. So all of these things are very important. I love what the Dalai Lama said. My religion is kindness. And truly, that is the essence of religion. Pure, unconditional love. If we practice that, if we practice loving God and practicing charity and kindness towards our fellow creatures, not just human beings, but all creatures on this earth, if we have that as the foundation of our consciousness, and we view everything that happens to us from that filter, from that basis, can you imagine the joy that we will be living in? That anchors our consciousness in joy. This affirmation of devotion is very, very important. We've all heard the stories of near-death experiences, and the soul is met by this loving presence that has a great sense of humor. And that presence doesn't say, so, did you get your degree? How much money did you make? Did you get the boat, the car, all the little toys? Did you have all that? The presence instead asks, how much did you love? How much love did you give in your life? But we read that and we think, oh, that's a nice sentiment, but feel it. Feel what that means in the day-to-day moments of our lives. How can we give more love? How we can think more loving thoughts? How we can make that the basis of our reality, so that everything that we perceive that happens to us in life comes through that filter. We just returned from a trip to India, very quick trip to India. And I was reminded of the words of Swami Shankaracharya, who said that life is always unsafe and unstable, like a drop of water on a lotus leaf. We especially, I think, as Americans, we make everything safe. You know, all the sidewalks are safe. The traffic, everybody stays in their lane. If a traffic light, goes on the blink, we all line up. The person on the right goes next and next and next and next. We're very orderly, the line in the bank, we're all queued up. Nobody cuts in front of anybody else. It's a source of great pride, that we stay in our lines. Other places in the world, Americans get in big trouble because they're telling people to go to the back of the line, and it gets to be a real issue. But in India, it's a flow. It's a flow of energy. The traffic, you can't even imagine how full it is. And the American embassy writes, a letter to people who are planning to go to India, and they say, now, be aware that the streets have free roaming livestock. And I just find that so amazingly charming. I remember one time, this was years ago, not on this trip, but I was waiting in a very hot taxi. The AC wasn't working, the taxi driver had run out of gas, and I was stuck with the windows rolled up in this very hot taxi, but he had left the radio running. And this Indian music was coming through the speaker very loud. And I just was in this state of joy. Even though it was physically uncomfortable, there was just so much joy. And this very pure white cow came up and looked at me in the window. And it was just such a thrill. I don't know. We have these little moments of joy that who knows when they come, but there they are. But on this trip, also with a cow, in this case a bull, many of you who have read the letters that we sent from India will remember some of this story. We were visiting a home for widows, very, very poor, destitute widows, in the town of Puri. And it was dark. It was well after sunset as we were leaving, and we were standing on the street just saying goodbye to the staff and the founder of this home, when who should walk up but this very large bull, black, big horns, big. And he was probably from master to me. It was like a small car. And he just wandered up to us and was part of the conversation for a while. But then one of our party, being Americans, never being in India before, thought, oh, let me take a picture. And so she shot a picture, and it was dark, so there was a flash. And I thought, oh, that's probably not a good idea. Being a Taurian myself, those little startling flashes are not very welcome. So everything was fine for a while, and then the bull just sort of reacted and charged the group. And I was thinking, life is always unsafe and unstable, like a drop of water on a lotus leaf. Fortunately, no one was hurt, no one was stabbed by these big horns, and it just became an interesting experience. If we can view all the raging bulls in our lives as just interesting experiences with the joy of God, if we are in the joy of God, truly we are like a lotus that comes up out of the mud and mire of this earth plane, and we flower, perfect and clean, no taint. And that's what the saints of this world are like. They're like that lotus. They come from the mud, but they bloom in beauty and joy and freedom and love. And that's what we want. That's the state of consciousness that we want to live in. And we can do that. Start by monitoring every word that comes out of the mouth of man. Go back into the thoughts. Purify the thoughts so that there's not even unkindness in your mind. Live in that, and we will be anchored in that peace. The pole star, make that your pole star. The love of God, developing devotion, and live more and more in that joy. God bless you.
Speaking about intellect and how you don't arrive at understanding through intellect alone. Intellect is certainly part of the picture, but it isn't the deciding factor. I don't know how many of you saw the movie Life of Pi. It was popular a year or so ago, and it's an interesting movie. It's like many things India. It begins in India, and it's this fantastic story. It's this, frankly, kind of unbelievable story, which is part of the charm, and it's kind of part of the point, actually. Because at the end of the movie, I read the book also, and I don't remember this part at the end of the book, but in the movie at the end, the interviewer and the person to whom the story happened are sort of talking and kind of reviewing, and in a very Western way, this interviewer is sort of saying, so, I mean, what really happened? I mean, come on. And the storyteller kind of gives this choice, sort of like, well, you could look at it this way, or you could look at it this way. Which way is more interesting? And he leaves it there. He doesn't say it was this or it was that. He says, you decide. You decide. Now, for a Westerner, that's a little annoying, because it's like, no, wait a minute. What? You just say what happened. Don't leave it sort of hanging there. But it's a beautiful part of the Indian culture that things remain a little bit ambiguous in life. And they do. And in India, that's just fine. That's just how life is. And we always want to pin it down. In quantum physics, there's this sort of cloud reality. If you want to know where the electron is, you can know, but you can't know in any given moment of time. You may be able to figure out where it is, but you won't be able to tell where it's going or how fast. And if you want to know where it's going and how fast, you may be able to figure out its trajectory, but you won't be able to know its position at any given moment. This is the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, and it, I think, drove a lot of Westerners crazy, because it's like, no, I want to know exactly where, how, what, And life says, you decide. And in our own way, we want all the rules to be perfectly understandable in the game of life. But in fact, we're presented with the game in motion. It's not like we get handed a little rule book on day one and, okay, this is how it works, and when you get to this move, you have to do this or the other thing. No, the game is rolling along merrily, and we sort of watch. And I was, my two sisters accompanied us on this trip, my two sisters and my dad. And at one point, one of my sisters and I were talking about games on our phones, and I was showing her a game. And it's one of these ones that's hard to explain. And it's complicated enough that, it's sort of like you can say, well, it works this way. If you have 3 of these, in a sequence, they'll all fall down the bottom. And, And I remember I played it a little bit for her, and I just sort of showed her how it was working. And she kind of scratched her head. Was like, well, I'm sure it makes sense after a while. Well, in a way, that's what life is saying. It sort of makes sense after a while. Well, in the reading today, Christ is giving us some hints, because the Pharisees come after him and say, they challenge him. Why are your disciples doing this? Now, you could fill in the blank. If it wasn't the washing hands thing, it would have been any one of 10 other things. They would have found something to try to trip him up. And in fact, they did. They kept on trying in other ways to trip him up. And he went right, I read the passage just as a sort of an exercise to see the kind of the broader context of it. He went right after them in a very vigorous way. That's not even, Swami doesn't even quote that part of it. He went right after them saying, you ignore your own law when it suits your preference. In other words, when it's to your advantage to ignore the law, you're happy to ignore the law. But you're willing to throw it at me when some little thing is out of line. And what he was basically saying is, and Swamiji is around this point, but he doesn't articulate it precisely. When a duty conflicts with a higher duty, it ceases to be a duty. Now, there again, we run into this spectrum of reality that can be kind of challenging, because in life, we want the lower duties to be duties, and we want the higher duties to be duties. And we want it all to sort of fit together. But there are times when one of them is in conflict with another. And we would see this with Swamiji. We would see him navigate through these situations very gracefully. Swami in the reading was talking about a kind of minefield of intellectual debate and hair-splitting definition. All of us in our lives have Pharisees on the brain, you could say. We all have Pharisees running around that say to us, but I want it to be this way. I think it's really, really important to do all these little minute things. If I follow the rules, if I do it exactly the way I did it before, then it'll all be just fine. It'll all be safe. It'll all be perfectly understandable. And life presents us with situations that challenge that, and challenge those Pharisees in the mind and say, no, there's a bigger reality. There is a more nuanced reality. And this is one of the things that we've learned to love. One of many things that we learned to love about India is that it's okay for things to stay a little bit uncertain, because you find the certainty in your heart, in your own experience. And, as Nirmala was telling this story about the bull, so many times you get into situations that are unpredictable, where you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know if the bull is going to knock somebody over, if, dire fears and colossal sufferings are going to be the result of this particular little piece of adventure. We were very briefly away from the rest of the family on this trip. We went to Pune, and they wanted to go to the Taj Mahal in Agra. We had already been to the Taj. It's wonderful, it's fantastic, but we didn't need to do that extra day, and we really did need to go to Pune. Well, it so happened that on the night we arrived in Pune and they arrived back in Delhi, my dad fell and cut his head, had to get stitches, cut his hand, had to get stitches. And there was this, India makes you pay your dues. And so my sisters had to go through this exercise of getting him over to the hospital, all these people. I mean, the manager of the hotel, the friends we were with on the trip, all these miscellaneous people just suddenly manifest, just like instantly. They're all there. And, there's this whole commotion. Everybody's got an idea. Okay, you have to do this. You got to call it, It's like this whole scene, you can't stay in control of it as a little person. But if you rise above it and you enjoy the show, if you enjoy the spectacle, oh my God, the entertainment value is beyond comprehension. And you come back to America or wherever, and you realize, we've got a lot of superstitions. It's easy to say when you go to somebody else's country, you can point to, oh, well, they're very superstitious about this. Ha, 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 isn't that cute? Isn't that quaint? Yeah, then you come back home and you go, gosh, let's see. Netflix is a kind of superstition. The shows that are on television that we think are going to bring us fulfillment or happiness, that's a kind of superstition. The materialism that we embrace with vigor and vim and enthusiasm, that's real superstition there. Gandhi made the point that thinking that material things can give us satisfaction, surely that is one of the great superstitions of the world. And it's true. And so we get a fascinating perspective on our own culture, our own awareness of it. But Swamiji, in the readings today, where he placed the affirmation devotion juxtaposed against this reading about the intellect not helping us to arrive at understanding, or not being the deciding factor in us reaching understanding, that love of the heart is the critical piece of the whole equation. Because if we open the heart, then the heart and the mind work together in an intuitive way, and we come to know. Then the uncertainty part pulls back. A few days ago in the Raja Yoga course, Chandrika was teaching the sections on affirmation, levels 7 and 8. And as part of the exercise, she passed out, we got to each choose an affirmation. And the one that I chose was awareness, which some weeks ago, before the end of the year, last year, that was the topic. It comes up in week 40. And as I was reading the affirmation, I was thinking, I remember the description. I remember one piece of the description because I also remember trying to translate it into Italian, and it was just about impossible to get it into Italian, because Swamiji says we need to become more aware of what we are aware with than what we are aware of. And you try putting that sentence into Italian, and it's just a train wreck. It's just a mess because you can't, the of and the with, it just doesn't quite fit. But if you think of it, we spend so much time in our lives being aware of the drama, of that drama that's going on outside. The awareness itself with which we are aware of the drama, there's joy there, there's bliss there. There is God's presence there. And we have to occasionally step back away from that. And this is one of the lessons that India has helped me to learn, because India you can't ignore. You can think you can ignore it, but you can't entirely ignore it. There's just way too much going on. It's full sensory overload. And there come times where you just want to close the door and say, thank you very much, bow, Haribol. Now I want to not have so much going on. But India teaches us, go within. Go within as a balance to all the commotion of life, all the drama, all the uncertainty of life. Nirmala was talking about the traffic and how there's this flow going on there. You know, in many ways, it's a lot safer there than here. Partly because there's not a lot of high speed going on, but partly because there's just this natural understanding of, okay, so you're moving in. Okay, I'll slow down. Yeah. Okay, I got to move over here. You guys need to get out of my way. Okay, you know, this is all done by little toots of the horn, and it's like bats sending out little radar signals. You know, it's just, okay, I'm here. We're here. You know, we're all tuning in, and people will happily, energetically cut you off in traffic. No big deal. Life goes on. My sisters were, I had warned them, but of course you can never entirely warn someone until they experience it themselves. There will be a time when some vehicle will be coming right at you. You're on your side of the freeway, you're on your side of the road, but somebody has to be driving right exactly at you, in your lane, etc. Well, it happened multiple times, but toward the end of the week and a half that we were there, it happened again. And watching my sister's response to this, she said, you know, at the beginning of the trip, that would have been a real freak out. Now it was like, you know what? Somebody's going to move. Somebody's going to get out of the way. It's all going to be fine. It's, you know, I've seen this one. It works out. Trust me, it's okay. And we have to learn to realize that life, there are going to be times where the truck looks like it's going to smash right into you. And you know in your heart, somehow I'm in the hands of the Divine Mother. I'm in the hands of God. Grab onto those hands. Hold on to those hands. That's the devotional part. Nobody can give you that. All the circumstances of your life, they can happen to you, but what happens in you is entirely of your own choosing. Choose that devotion, because once it awakens, it guides your life, and it will guide your life. We had the joy of meeting up with friends that we hadn't seen for years over there, and realizing again, as we knew intuitively, but email, Facebook, FaceTime, texting, you know, all of these things are great. They're all wonderful. They all help to keep us in touch and keep us close. But actual being in the room, sharing, talking, meditating, chanting, singing, all of those things help to communicate a magnetism and a vibration and a level of sharing that the other ones, they kind of approximate. They take us in that direction, but they can't ever quite give us the same thing. And what we're really seeking in all of that togetherness is we're seeking communion with God. We want that kind of face time with God, with Christ, with the Masters, with Divine Mother, with however we frame that in our own hearts. We want that. Awaken the devotion in your heart that will draw that, because it draws it ever, ever more surely. And then life becomes, as Nirmala was describing, the traffic over there, it just becomes a flow. It's not chaotic. It's not without reason or without sense. There is more than a logic to it. There's a grace to it. But devotion is the key, because the intellect just keeps separating. It keeps saying, oh, but no, not that one, not that one. The rules say, and life says, ha, rules. I made the rules. Trust me, I know what the rules are. Follow devotion and you go straight, your path goes straight to the target, straight to the goal. And with that, you can know the fulfillment that your own heart is seeking. But awakening that is our job. That is our work in this lifetime and in this world. And to share it with others to the degree that we can. We'll